Hello, my name is Lennart Engelhardt, and I'm from the company called Funka. Today I'm going to talk about navigating the path to digital accessibility maturity. And I have an agenda, of course, and I'm going to talk about what's designed for all, why digital accessibility, how digital accessibility, and how can we together make the world better by making it more accessible. So the first question that's really important, and that's kind of the where everything starts, and that's what is design for all. I'm sure that heard of it, but I want to emphasize on what that is. And design for all, it's about a concept that describes the way a wide range of design approaches, methods, and how we work to meet many more, the vast diversity of users. And also that when the designers, we are all designers in somewhat way, how we already start to think how it's possible to access something during this process. And I'm sure you heard about the chasm. And you can see I use this as a description of a product, how you get customers when you launch products or services. And usually when you create the product or you create code or services, you are always looking at many companies are looking at the innovators and the early adopters. You say, if we only can get 1,000 customers or 100 customers, then it's just going to work really well. But since we've been around for a while, we know that that's not how it works, because you're going to reach the chasm and you're going to fall down, straight down into a black hole, because you started and the innovation was made for the early adopters. Working with design for all, we are looking into the big majority of users, and you start with those who has the biggest challenges, and that's the design for all idea. And it's actually really clever to have a design for all structure as a part of your DNA, of the company DNA. Why is that clever? Because if you think about that all the time in everything you do, in all the processes, you're going to get an improved user experience. And that shows that many more of your users, whatever it is, they're going to get more engaged. And it's not about people with disabilities, but everyone. And that means that you can create products that are more intuitive, efficient, and enjoyable to use. And that will give you a wider audience of reach, of course. That means that many more potential customers, potential users you're going to increase the customer satisfaction, and of course, the business growth. And when you have learned, when you really have design for all in your DNA, you're going to reach to innovation, because that shows that you as a creator, you're going to think if you're going to solve something for everyone, it's going to be probably new solutions. And that means that you're mature and you're going to create new business. And least but not last is the social responsibility. It makes everyone proud. It's the right thing to do. And it shows that the company has the values. It's taken its social responsibility. And I'll share with you some examples of design for all. I mean, I don't know if you still are using the tap with use two taps to get water. But for people with disabilities, rheumatism and arthritis, that's a problem. And that's why they designed the one grip tap. So anyone could use it. I'm sure that in most homes, that is what you see. And it's also beneficial for environment because you get the right mix of water and so on. But this is another example. When Ferrari, they worked together with the Cambridge University, they found out and they knew that people that can afford, I can't unfortunately, to buy a Ferrari. The problem was that these guys, they're getting a bit fatter, the belly's getting bigger, and they're also getting arthritis, so they can't get in and out of their car. And so they developed it and made it much easier to get in and out. And of course, people used it more than 100% more usage over a period of time. And of course, sales increased. So that's examples of the design for all concept. So now let's get into digital accessibility. What is digital accessibility? Digital accessibility is about everyone, regardless of ability, being able to take in information and perform services in a digital society, in the digital world. And um, and what is the connection then between um, design for all and digital accessibility? Of course, it is. If you already have digital accessibility as a part of your DNA, it's going to be you're going to reach so much faster to digital accessibility, and you're also going to sustain and you're going to keep the level of digital accessibility because that's a part of the DNA. Okay, let's get into the subject then. My name is Lennart Engelhardt, and I'm the founder of Funka. I started that about 23, soon 24 years ago, and I'm a social entrepreneur. And I've started somewhere around 30 companies, and as you understand, not all of them worked out really well. So yeah, and my friends, they say that I have all the combination of letters that you could expect, and the only one that they say I didn't get was the IQ. And I'm trying my best anyway. I'm working. That's good. Having all the diagnoses, you do a lot of stuff, and hopefully something gets well, good. And I'm just joking, of course. But you can see I've been using black and white as a contrast, and you can see that really, really well on your computer, I hope. And but you can also see this probably really well. Not all of us, but because this is the way when you have an e-commerce platform, or if you want to make ads for sale, a lot of companies use not only in the digital in digital applications, but also in the real world, they are using to sell stuff. The problem is if you're colorblind, it's going to look like this. And that means that on an application, we probably, or an e-commerce site, we lose about 12% of because of all demand because they are colorblind. And that's a kind of a simple way of showing that if you know things, if you know what accessibility is, you could, in a simple way, solve a lot of those issues. If you start doing it when you look, how are we going to create this for everyone? And other areas that we are talking about is like, I'm sure that some of you are using glasses or lenses or having some kind of a aid for hearing, or sometimes also have a, like me all the time, as you can hear, I'm stressed all the time and have a cognitive, not a disorder, but I'm a bit cognitive low, and that means I got a high kind of stress, and when I get to a website that doesn't work, I'm not going to be a good customer. And also I have people around me that have autism, like ADHD or ADD or dyslexia, and they also have big problems. But also when I'm on an airplane and I forgot my earpods and I want to look at a movie, I need captions. And because if I wouldn't have captions, I couldn't watch the video because I forgot them. And so there's a lot of situations that we're looking into when you talk about accessibility. And we always think about the people, not always, but many of us think about people in wheelchair, if they're deaf, they're blind, and they have severe and what we call permanent kind of a disability. But all of us in any time and quite often, we have temporary disabilities or situational, like when you're on your vacation and you want to look at a good movie, or in your hammock and the sun comes down through the trees and you can't see anything because the contrast is not good enough. So what we are saying is that digital accessibility is not for the other group, the people that has a disability. It's about, sometimes it's for people for a lifetime, but sometimes it's for some time. And but people like me that are getting older, is for everyone that is getting older, because when you get older, your eyesight is getting worse, your hearing sight is getting worse, you're not as quick, your cognitive capacity goes down. So, and that's why we started Funka in the year of 2000. And the whole soul of our company is design for all. That's where we always start. How can we solve situations and problems with the perspective of design for all? We are situated in Stockholm, and we have also an office in Oslo, but we have customers worldwide. We are 22 employees, and we've been around so long, so we've been a part of the standardization works, working in the WCAG groups, and we also one of the founders of the expert organization, the AIIP, where you get the certificate if you're a professional accessibility expert. And we also work with the legislation, and we have a research and innovation department that's done a few hundred projects the last 20 years. So you can say that we are a part of the change of the disability and accessibility movement. And we are value driven. So our why is that everyone must be included in the digital world. We cannot let anyone outside. Of course, there are going to be bigger challenges, the more complex it is, but we could in a good way solve up to 96% of the population so they can be included in the digital world. And the how are you guys that are sitting out there, because it's you and your customer that makes it possible. I mean, we are only enablers. And when you work with digital accessibility and your customers and users can use it, then the world becomes more accessible. And what we do is that we have created a way of what we call an accessibility journey, which consists of processes, products, and services. So we have tools and methods to create change, and that's working with change management, audits, document remediation, developer support, accessibility training, research and innovation, anything that you would need, or someone, a company or an authority would need to do the journey to become accessible, digital accessible. And that would, when you only stay in the group of what you call people with disabilities, it's about 1.3 billion people in the world, and that's a lot. And since I'm from Sweden, we say it's about 20%, and different countries say 15 up to 20. So that's about 20% of the population in your country, probably, or we know, have some kind of a disability that affects their use of digital assets or applications. And when we started this 24 years ago, we were kind of surprised that, no, we weren't surprised at that time, but the knowledge of accessibility was really low. And as I'm going to show you soon, it's still very, very low. And everyone spends a lot of time on the websites, their e-commerce sites and applications, and still they look like this. And I mean, I don't understand why you need to hide your doors and windows. At that time, of course you did, because you didn't want the enemies to get in to your home and to the safety. But why do we build websites today or applications where you can't access them? I mean, it's not very complicated to do, but I can share with you, this is what it looks like in about 95% of all the websites or commercial e-commerce sites today. And I will just share this expression. Of course, you already heard of it and you know about it. It's the WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. That's what everyone is using to measure. I mean, are we compliant or not? And in different ways in the legislation, the WCAG is involved depending on what country. In Europe, it looks one way. In the United States, it looks another one. In Canada's got this, etc. But this is the expression that I would kind of relate to when I talk about compliance. And here's an example of someone trying to sell a trench coat on their website. And it's a really nice trench coat, and he looks really cool, doesn't it? The problem is that this is where you're supposed to find information on how to buy it. And I can tell you that didn't work for me. So I asked my experts, can you do something about it? And they just put something in behind, and suddenly it's accessible. And I would say that about 80% of all the errors of all the websites could be fixed really quick if you only knew how to do it. And you could actually increase your sales. So to share you just some short numbers, we made a test. We screened 400 e-commerce sites, companies in Sweden on 16 of the 51 criteria for WCAG, and only 2 of them managed to be better than 16 criteria or manage the 16 criteria. And there are 200 million websites global on the world that is active. There are billions, but there are 200 million active ones, and less than 4% of them would reach some kind of accessibility when they are measured by WebAIM, who measures that every year. So the perspectives of accessibility is the human perspective, the economical or beneficial perspective, and the legal perspective. So why should we be accessible? And in the human perspective, of course, I mean, looking out of a company perspective, the ESG goals is to reach the goals that the United Nations put up. If you are accessible, you're gonna solve some of the goals or take a part of the goals. But actually, there's actually only one reason, and that is the only right thing to do. I don't think that anyone that actually builds not accessible websites wants to do it, or has the idea of now I'm going to actively discriminate someone. I don't think that's the way it works. And then you got the economical and beneficials. I mean, it depends on if you're an authority or if you're a commercial company. But I mean, looking into business, again, using Sweden as an example, 36% of Sweden population cannot use digital inaccessible and information and services, and that means they cannot buy on your website, on your e-commerce site. And Forrester Research has they show that about $2,000 billion US dollars will not be bought by this group, and is growing by 14% every year. And they also show that if you invest, you get $100 US if you invest $1. So I would say, and there are so many more reasons, but I tell you, it's a good investment, and you get benefits. I mean, if you just imagine how many phone calls you don't need to get to your customer service if you make an accessible website. And then the legal side, of course, and that's what's pushing the business right now. And the legal side is if you and the legal side is that that there are directives in the EU that are transposed now to legislation in every country, and that's driving. We get phone calls, emails every day from big actors that really wants to become digital accessible, and they ask what's going to happen if we break the law. And we don't really know yet. The only thing we know is it's not going to be nice. It's probably going to be expensive. You probably have to pay fines, or in the worst case, we don't know yet, they might close down your website. And the digital accessibility within the EU, we have a story and a history, and it really started with the United Nations Convention about people's rights and human rights. And then that moved to a digital strategy that they are working on in the European Commission, and that was about 2007, 2008. They started with a 10-year disability strategy, and from 2015 we have the procurement directive that means that if you want to deliver to public sector, you need to be able to be digitally accessible with the services and instructions and everything that you use. And also in 2018, they went further, and then you had the Web Accessibility Directive in 2018, and that was that all the actors within the public sector need to have websites, intranets, apps, and also documents that are accessible. And in last year, in 2022, we got the European Accessibility Act, and it gets even bigger and even wider. And now it's also going to include private sector and everyone, companies that have a relationship with the business to consumers. So so you can say that private sector is now involved in becoming digital accessible. And the legislations that was transposed now in all the countries in Europe, they are going to start applying in 2025, in June 2025. And from then on, the authorities will have controls, and they will check and screen website to be able to increase the usage. And of course, the idea is not to pay fines, but to get everyone to get accessible websites so everyone can get involved. Okay, so let's go into the solution then. What's the path to digital accessibility maturity? Well, there are two ways of doing it. One way that most companies are working today is very reactive. And reactive means that you actually are kind of, oh, well, I got a problem. Can you solve it? And then you would call a company or an expert, and they'll make an audit, and they will give you a big report and say you can solve this. And then you get 800 errors on your web page or in your application. And then the team who's going to solve this, they are not going to be able to do that because there's too many things, and you got too many things going on your ticket list and your sprint meetings. So some of the issues will be solved and some are not. And while you're solving them, the house is on fire on the other side, and when other parts of the organization, they will continue develop not accessible code. So the reactive way, and that's the most common way today, is not the way to do it. So the way is actually to work proactively, of course, and to do that, you need to start your accessibility journey. And the strategy to do that is not about reaching digital compliance. Of course, that's something that you need to do, but the whole thing is to use compliancy as a change maker to become a mature organization. It needs to be a part of your culture. It needs to be a part of your DNA. So while reaching digital accessibility, you are on a path to get to design for all in the DNA. And how does this work? And of course, the same way it works when you do other processes, there is a process to create change, and there's the development process where you're identifying your problems, you identify your capacity, you identify who you are, what you know, and then you design your solutions. You decide what policy you're going to have. You decide what resources you need, and then you start implementing change to become compliant or technically compliant, accessible, and at the same time you iterate. After that, you iterate what you've done, and you're in the learning process. So so you need to know where to start, and you would start by identifying your maturity. And the maturity is in 5 different steps, from not knowing anything about accessibility, moving to awareness, knowing to action. Action is actually when you start. I think I would say probably most of you guys are between awareness and action. And that means that you know you need to do it. And some of you have started, but not in a structured way. You're doing some stuff, working a bit reactively. And as soon as you're starting to get up to integration, you are starting to become mature, and you're going to work in a more structured way where you integrate it in other processes. And then when you get up to the 5th level on optimization, then you have a maturity, and you're going to go into the innovation process, like I talked about in the design for all process. And working with the maturity model as deciding where you are, deciding where you're going, and then you create the complete accessibility journey. You are moving, you're deciding where you're going, and on each level, you go through the whole wheel, you do the iteration, and you have a learning process. That's the accessibility journey. And what this shows is accessibility is not a project, it's an ongoing process. And it must mature into your culture, of the DNA culture and independence, aiming to design for all. And the reason it's all your digital assets, it's a matter of it's a living creature. It's a never-ending story. It's changing all the time. And even if the developers are doing a fantastic job with the infrastructure, the design people are doing fantastic UX and UI, and then you have the everyday people working with the digital asset. They own the digital assets. They are very creative, and they're going to put red headlines on a green background, and suddenly you're not accessible at all. And that's why everyone needs to get involved into this process. So I'll give you a quick summary here. What you do is that you start to decide your ambition and what level of legal requirements do you need to be able to go on the journey. I mean, if you're in 8 different countries, what kind of level, what kind of compliance do you need? How do you work that out? What goals and what timetable and what resources do we need? And what you do is that you don't need an accessibility expert when you start. Start with project management, someone that knows a bit about it, but does not need to be an expert. And train the procurement. So when you start buying third-party applications, they need to, or if you have external suppliers, you have to find out a way of putting on demands so they would deliver to you. And don't build your own internal accessibility department so you think someone is going to go out there and just fix it. No, what you need to do is to start working with communication in the whole company and upskill all parts of the organization within the area that applies in this area for them in this part of the company. And the best way to start now is to partner with an external expert that could guide you and be your guide into the first level of accessibility. And when you have moved up and increased the level, you need to stay there. So that's why you need to monitor all your digital access all the time. And then you're going to see how it's quite easy actually to keep up the level if you just get there, if everyone that's involved has been educated and trained. And from there, you continue to integrate digital accessibility in all processes. You can decide, you cannot start a new project, you cannot design a new product, you cannot make an instruction book. Nothing can be done anywhere in the company or the organization. It needs to be integrated, and that means that you're going to stay and you're going to be you're on the first level of going into a design for all concept for the whole company. Okay, that was all for me. Thank you very much.